I really was not expecting this, I swear. But Jimmy would say now I have bookends, so true. I'd like to thank Seda Thompson, Jim Broderick, Meredith Baxter Burney, Gary Frank, Quinn Cummings, and Nigel and Carol McKeon, and our new producer who's very young and fun, Ed Zwick. Thank you very much.
And she leaves acting. She leaves Hollywood. She's gone. Some people might say that's sad. Others might say, well, she saved her own life.
There was a time when Kristy McNichol was everywhere. Her face lit up magazine covers, her laughter filled talk shows, and her name alone could draw millions of viewers. She had that rare spark, the kind of warmth that made people feel like they already knew her. Then, almost without warning, she was gone. One week she was smiling from every TV screen. The next, her name had simply stopped being said. No messy headlines, no public meltdown, just a quiet disappearance that left the world wondering where she went and why. For years, her silence became its own mystery. What could make someone who had everything simply walk away? She was the youngest to win 2 Emmys, the kind of actress who could make a whole room feel what she felt. She was Hollywood's little sister until she wasn't. Kristy had been acting since childhood, carrying her family, her career, and the weight of expectation before she ever had a chance to figure out who she really was. By the time she reached her 20s, she had lived more lifetimes than most adults ever would. And then she vanished. Her story isn't about downfall or disgrace. It's about a young woman who gave everything to an industry that applauded her talent, but never saw the toll it took. A story about the cost of growing up too fast, and what happens when someone finally decides they've had enough. To understand why she walked away, we have to start at the beginning, before the fame, before the pressure, in a small Los Angeles home where the lights of Hollywood were still just a dream. Kristy McNichol's story began far from the red carpets that would one day bear her name. She was born in Los Angeles in 1962, a city built on dreams, but her family was just trying to survive. Her father left when she was young, leaving her mother Carolyn to raise Kristy and her older brother Jimmy alone. Carolyn worked wherever she could, secretary by day, makeup saleswoman by night, sometimes even an extra in low-budget films. The children grew up watching her chase the rent more than the spotlight. One day, when Carolyn took a bit part in a monster movie called Bigfoot, she brought the kids along because she couldn't afford a sitter. They waited in the car while the crew set up lights and cameras. A passing crew member caught a glimpse of them and said casually, "Those two would be great in commercials." It was a throwaway line, but it changed everything. Soon Kristy and Jimmy were auditioning for cereal ads and toy spots, their mother juggling schedules and contracts she barely understood. Jimmy was confident and easygoing, but Kristy had something different, a quiet gravity that made people look twice. Even in a 30-second ad, she could show emotion that felt real. Work poured in, and what started as a side income quickly became the family's lifeline. At home, childhood and adulthood blurred. Kristy was the one who kept the house organized, made sure bills got mailed, and comforted her mother when times were rough. Once, Carolyn joked, "You're the mother and I'm the child." It was meant lightly, but it was true. While other kids worried about school dances and pop quizzes, Kristy was already carrying a family. That early responsibility taught her discipline and compassion, traits that would make her a phenomenal actor later on. But it also left little space to simply be a kid. When she laughed on screen, it was often the only time she felt like a teenager. When she cried in a scene, it was because she understood what it meant to hurt quietly. Before fame, Kristy learned how to perform not for the cameras, but for survival. That same strength and poise would soon catch Hollywood's attention and turn a responsible child into its next beloved star. Soon, the world would see what she'd been carrying all along. Kristy's first taste of real stardom came at just 13 years old. In 1976, she was cast as Buddy Lawrence in Family. a television drama that dared to show what real life looked like behind suburban doors. Buddy wasn't perfect, and that was the point. She was messy, curious, and honest. A teenager who questioned everything adults thought they understood. For Kristy, it was a role that fit like truth. She could bring warmth and weight to a single glance, a skill rare even among veteran actors. Viewers saw not a character but a person, and they connected instantly. Critics praised her authenticity. Audiences wrote letters saying Buddy felt like the daughter, sister, or friend they wished they had. Within 2 years, Kristy had won 2 Emmy Awards, becoming one of the youngest actors in television history to do so. But success came with structure. While her classmates were at football games, Kristy was memorizing lines and taping late into the night. Her mother, now her full-time manager, kept the schedule packed. Each day blurred into the next. Makeup chairs, studio lights, interviews. Fame didn't feel exciting anymore. It felt heavy. Still, she smiled through it. On talk shows, she was quick-witted and bright. The perfect blend of confidence and humility. She didn't realize that what fans saw as maturity was really endurance. By the time Family ended in 1980, Kristy had spent her entire adolescence playing one. She'd grown up on cue, with the world watching every step. When the cameras finally stopped, she should have rested. Instead, Hollywood came calling again. Films, press tours, new contracts. Everyone wanted more of the girl who could make emotion look effortless. She said yes to all of it, not knowing that every yes would soon bring her closer to breaking point. When Family ended, Kristy McNichol was just 18, but she already felt decades older. Hollywood didn't see her age. It saw reliability, bankability, and a young actress who could do anything. So the offers came all at once, and Kristy said yes to nearly all of them. In 1980, she starred opposite Tatum O'Neal in Little Darlings, a coming-of-age film about 2 girls from opposite worlds navigating adolescence. The story was funny, raw and real, and Kristy's performance stole the film. She played Angel Bright, a tough street kid with a soft core, and the mix of humor and heartbreak made her unforgettable. Critics praised her honesty, saying she could express more with one look than most actors could with a page of dialogue. The film became a cultural moment, and Kristy became a household name. That same year, she filmed The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, alongside Dennis Quaid and Mark Hamill, showing a grittier side of herself. A year later, she took on Only When I Laugh, a Neil Simon drama that earned her a Golden Globe nomination. It was the kind of run most actors only dream of. 3 hits in 2 years, everyone proving she was more than just a teen idol. But behind that success was exhaustion she couldn't name. Her schedule was relentless. New scripts, new cities, new expectations. She was learning to smile on demand, even when she wanted to disappear. Every director wanted her light, but few noticed it was dimming. In interviews, she laughed easily and deflected questions about stress. She was young, talented, and adored. What could possibly be wrong? But the truth was that Kristy had never learned how to say no. Not to her mother, not to her managers, not to the industry that had built her life. She carried everyone's hopes on her back, afraid that slowing down would make it all fall apart. As the early 1980s rolled on, that pace began to show its cracks. The pirate movie, 1982, was meant to be a fun detour, a musical parody that should have been lighthearted. Instead, it became a public low point. The movie flopped, and critics were brutal. For the first time, Hollywood turned cold. But it wasn't the reviews that hurt most. It was what they represented, that she could give everything, and it still might not be enough. The exhaustion that had followed her since childhood was no longer just emotional, it was physical. She stopped sleeping, she smiled less, her appetite vanished. Fame had given her everything she thought she wanted, and quietly taken everything she needed. And still, when a new script arrived in 1984, a romance set in the French Alps, she accepted it. The role would change her life, but not the way anyone expected. By 1984, Kristy McNichol had been running on empty for years. Each project blurred into the next, and rest was something that only happened between flights. When she accepted the lead role in Just the Way You Are, it seemed like another natural step, a romantic drama about a musician with a disability who learns to love herself again. On paper, it was a beautiful story. In reality, it nearly destroyed her. Filming was set in the French Alps. From the outside, it looked idyllic, the snow-capped mountains, the crisp air, the postcard villages. But for Kristy, it was isolating. She was thousands of miles from home, surrounded by strangers, carrying the pressure of another lead role when she could barely sleep or eat. Her anxiety had reached a breaking point. Crew members noticed she was trembling between takes, forgetting lines she'd once mastered in a single read. Some days she'd burst into tears without knowing why. Others, she'd sit quietly, staring out at the mountains, detached from the world around her. She lost weight, her energy faded, and her once bright presence turned fragile. The studio brushed off her concerns. When she confided in her manager, she was told to push through, that she was strong, professional, and the show had to go on. But her body was giving out, and so was her mind. During a short break in production, Kristy flew back to California and finally sought help. A close friend brought her to a doctor who specialized in treating young performers. He listened, really listened, and told her something she'd never heard before. She wasn't weak, she was exhausted, anxious, and deeply wounded by years of unprocessed pressure. For the first time, someone saw beyond the fame. He advised her not to return to France, not to finish the film. But Kristy, loyal to a fault, went back anyway. She finished Just the Way You Are, but the cost was irreversible. When filming wrapped, she was 22 years old and completely spent. Then came the headlines. The studio, unwilling to acknowledge a mental health crisis, called it a chemical imbalance. Tabloids twisted it into scandal, addiction, breakdown, drama. The truth was simpler and sadder. Kristy was suffering from severe anxiety and depression. In interviews years later, she said, "It would have been easier to kick a drug habit than go through the years of hell that I did." When the movie finally premiered, her performance was tender and vulnerable, a mirror of her real pain. Audiences saw beauty. They didn't see the collapse behind it. That year marked a quiet turning point. Kristy had given everything she could. What came next would no longer be about ambition. It would be about survival. After Just the Way You Are, Kristy McNichol disappeared from screens for a while. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. And for the first time, she didn't try to give one. Recovery wasn't glamorous. It was private. She spent her days close to family, far from cameras, learning what rest actually felt like. The world kept moving. New shows, new stars, but Kristy was finally standing still. When she eventually returned in 1988, it wasn't with a grand announcement or a press tour. It was through a sitcom, Empty Nest, a spin-off of The Golden Girls. The role wasn't heavy or tragic. She played Barbara Weston, a police officer with a bright personality and a sharp sense of humor. It was the kind of part that let her breathe again. Grounded, funny, and human. Audiences were thrilled to see her back. For viewers who'd grown up watching Family, it felt like a reunion. That same familiar warmth was still there, only quieter now. Her timing was effortless, her smile easy again. For a while, it seemed like she had found balance, work that didn't break her, people who respected her space, and a rhythm she could sustain. But even in this steadier phase, old struggles lingered beneath the surface. The anxiety never fully left, it just hid behind laughter. Friends noticed she grew quieter between tapings, sometimes skipping after parties or interviews. She loved acting, but it no longer defined her. The long days on set that once thrilled her now left her drained. She'd learned what it felt like to fall apart, and she could feel the edges fraying again. Then, in 1992, Kristy made a decision that stunned everyone. She walked away. No headlines, no scandal, just a statement that she was leaving Empty Nest for health reasons. Fans hoped it was temporary. The networks called it a hiatus. But Kristy knew it was final. She was choosing herself this time, not the script. For the first time since childhood, she wasn't being directed. She was directing herself. In private, Kristy was doing something few actors ever get to do: heal in peace. She spent time with her family, traveled a little, and rediscovered what routine felt like without a camera schedule. Friends say she was different, lighter, more present. The constant worry of missing the next opportunity was gone. She no longer lived by call sheets and contracts. In the early 2000s, she broke her silence in a brief interview and confirmed what many had only speculated. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. "The truth is, I was very sick then," she said quietly. "I needed to get well." There was no self-pity in her voice, just honesty. For the first time, fans understood that her absence wasn't a mystery, it was survival. Mental health was rarely discussed openly in the 1990s, especially in Hollywood. Kristy's choice to speak about it years later wasn't for attention, it was for awareness. She wanted others, especially young performers, to know that walking away doesn't mean failing. It can mean saving yourself before it's too late. She had been a star since childhood, but now she was learning to live without an audience. She found new rhythms in ordinary days: walking her dog, playing tennis, spending afternoons with friends from outside the business. The pace was quiet, but it was hers. Her brother Jimmy often said she was the bravest person he knew, not because she faced cameras, but because she learned when to turn them off. He had seen her at her lowest and understood why she chose peace over performance. It wasn't quitting, it was choosing life. In 2001, Kristy made her retirement official. "I don't miss the work," she said. "I miss the people, but not the pressure." She knew what she was walking away from and what she was walking toward. By the mid-2000s, her life had taken on a gentler shape. She taught acting lessons to local students who admired her honesty as much as her talent. She became an advocate for mental health awareness and an example of grace in retirement, not a comeback story, but a continuing one. She once said, "If people remember me, I hope it's for being true." That line could sum up her whole career. From the child who worked to keep a family afloat, to the woman who walked away to stay whole, Kristy McNichol's journey was always about authenticity. There's a quiet strength in knowing when the spotlight has done enough. Kristy didn't fade, she chose to step out of the light. And in doing so, she proved that sometimes the greatest performance is the one you give to yourself. Away from the spotlight, Kristy McNichol finally found what years of success had denied her ordinary peace. She began teaching acting at a private school in Los Angeles, mentoring young performers who saw her not as a celebrity, but as someone who understood. In her classroom, there were no agents, no camera marks, no talk of ratings, just truth. She'd tell her students that good acting wasn't about pretending, it was about paying attention. "You don't have to be perfect," she'd remind them. "You just have to be present." She filled her days with the kind of simplicity that once seemed impossible. Mornings on the tennis court, afternoons walking her dogs along quiet streets, evenings cooking with friends. The same discipline that had carried her through fame now anchored her in calm routine. In 2012, Kristy shared another truth, one she'd kept private for decades. Through her publicist, she announced that she was gay and had been happily living with her partner Marty Allen since the early 1990s. There was no press conference, no reality TV reveal, just honesty, offered gently to the world. She said she hoped her openness would help young people who felt different or alone. It was her way of giving something back, not from a stage, but from experience. Those who know her say she laughs easily now. She still lives in Los Angeles, still teaches occasionally, still stays close to her brother Jimmy. Her circle is small, but her life feels full. She no longer measures success in scripts or applause, just in moments of quiet connection, in the freedom to live without explaining herself. Decades after her last role, her name still drifts through the nostalgia corners of the internet. Old clips from Family or Little Darlings appear, and comments fill up with memories. She was my favorite. She felt real. They don't make stars like her anymore. And maybe that's the point. Kristy McNichol didn't fade away. She settled into something steadier. She became proof that a person can step out of the light without losing their glow. Kristy McNichol didn't disappear. She simply stepped away from a world that never learned how to slow down. For decades, her name meant energy, emotion, and youth, the girl who could make millions feel seen. But her greatest role came after the cameras stopped. It wasn't about fame or applause. It was about finally giving herself the care she'd always given everyone else. In an industry that teaches you to stay visible, Kristy proved that peace can be the most powerful legacy of all. She didn't fade. She chose stillness. And somehow, that decision made her unforgettable.